The morning she tried to evict me, the sky was calm.
Too calm.
The kind of quiet that comes before a storm that doesn't announce itself. Regina Langford stood on my porch in her silk robe, holding that paper like it was a royal decree.
Her voice was cold, sharp.
The kind that cuts before you even realize you're bleeding. Pack your things, Miranda. You've got 48 hours. I remember my hands trembling, not from fear, but from disbelief. I'd paid every rent, fixed every leak, and even brought her tea when she was sick. And still, she looked at me like I was dirt she could sweep off her marble floors. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because the older I get, the more I've learned silence is its own kind of weapon. So I smiled. I took that eviction notice, folded it neatly, and said, "Don't worry, Regina. I won't overstay my welcome." But in my mind, I whispered the truth she'd soon discover. I wasn't leaving. Not until she did. And when I finally bought that mansion from under her nose, for half its worth, I made sure the keys she dropped on the floor echoed loud enough to remind her. Power doesn't scream. It simply changes hands. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was making coffee when I heard the thud, a folded paper taped to my front door. Notice to vacate immediately. Property repossession. No warning. No call. No court order. Just my landlord, Regina Calvert, standing on the porch, arms crossed, wearing that thin smile that pretends to be polite. "You've had your time here, Miranda. I need the property back. Be gone by Friday." I reminded her that I'd paid rent, early in fact. She waved the receipt off. I sold the property. New owner wants it empty. She didn't sell it. She lied. And the worst part? She was recording the scene, waiting for me to beg. I didn't. I looked at her and said quietly, "If you're so sure this house isn't mine anymore, Regina, you'd better pray you're right." That night, as I boxed my things, my lawyer called. "Miranda, I just discovered something about her property records." He sent me a scan of the sale document. The buyer's signature looked familiar. It was mine. Or at least, my name forged with my old signature style, the one I hadn't used in 10 years. Regina had forged my signature to create a fake sale, then claimed default on rent to evict me faster. I let Regina believe I was broken, a woman packing boxes in shame. But behind the curtain, I had begun a full financial reconstruction, linking her assets, her shell companies, and her hidden mansion portfolio. One file stood out. Valemont Estate Holdings, listed under an anonymous buyer. A $500 million mansion on the city's coast. Owner, Regina Calvert. Pending foreclosure. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The mansion was drowning in debt. Regina was desperate. That's why she needed my house, why she'd forged documents, why she was willing to destroy me. She was trying to save herself. I visited the mansion quietly. From the gates, I saw workers repainting the walls white. A woman was barking orders, Regina, dressed in white linen, pretending to be royalty. The security guard stopped me. "No visitors allowed." I smiled faintly. "Tell Mrs. Calvert an old tenant came to say goodbye." She never came out, of course. But I didn't need her to. I'd seen enough to confirm the mansion's deed and its debt status. Regina's arrogance had blinded her to the cracks in her empire. And I'd just found the largest one. That night, Everett called again. "Miranda, the bank just put that mansion up for silent auction. Guess what day it opens?" "When?" "Friday. The same day she's forcing you out." I closed my eyes and smiled. The universe had just handed me a weapon. I only needed the courage to use it. Friday came. While Regina stood outside my apartment, tapping her watch impatiently, I stood in another room, a boardroom downtown, bidding quietly on her mansion through my proxy lawyer, Everett. The boardroom smelled of polished oak and old money, the kind of room where men like Victor Langley thought women like me were decoration, not competition. They didn't notice me at first. I walked in quietly, deliberately, the leather folder at my side. The chandelier threw diamonds of light across the table. The men wore certainty like armor. Valemont Estate, opening bid $320 million, the auctioneer announced. The hush that followed was exactly the sound of appetite. Victor smiled as if the estate were already his. When the bid started, I kept my hand down. I watched the numbers climb. Then, because timing is a discipline, I raised my paddle. $325 million. The amount echoed in the vault of the room, once from the auctioneer, then again from my mouth, held like a simple fact. Men shifted. Victor's expression changed the way water changes the shape of a stone. He leaned forward, voice low with disdain. You can't afford this. I turned to him slowly, calm as a clock. You fired the wrong tenant, Mr. Langley. Gasps moved like a current. He recognized the voice. Some part of his memory flipped to the day he'd watched me with contempt near my front gate. His jaw worked. The room, which had expected theater, got instead the steady beat of intention. By the time the gavel fell, the papers were mine. I didn't raise my chin. I folded the leather folder, stood, and said quietly, "Have the movers contact my office. I'll arrange a date." As I walked out, Victor watched me go with something like shock. Outside the building, the city wind hit my face. It tasted like rain, like the exact kind of cold that makes you breathe steadier. I felt smaller and taller at once. It wasn't triumph that warmed me. It was the quiet, steady feeling of a plan beginning to settle into its just shape. That night my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice, thin with urgency. "Miss Kensington, you bought his mansion, yes? Good. Then you need to know where he hid the first forged deed and who signed it to place your name on his ledgers." I froze. The voice hung up before I could respond. I sat in the dark, staring at my phone. Someone was watching. Someone knew what Regina and Victor had done. And they wanted me to know too. The question was why. What did they gain from helping me? That night, a knock rattled my door. I peered through the peephole. A man in a gray suit, clean-shaven, too calm. "Mrs. Kensington?" "Yes. You're looking into things that don't concern you." He slipped an envelope under the door. Photos of me entering the auction building. "Consider this your first warning." I froze. Regina wasn't acting alone. Someone else, someone powerful, was behind her fraud. Inside the envelope was a card with a single name typed in gold. Victor Langley. I stood there holding the card, my hand steady, but my mind racing. Victor Langley. A name that once meant something in my old career, a financier who'd built and collapsed 3 corporations through offshore laundering. He was Regina's silent partner. And now he knew I was coming for them both. I didn't sleep that night. I just planned. Victor Langley. I reached out to a contact in the Anti-Fraud Bureau, discreetly. They confirmed Victor had been under investigation for years, but nothing stuck. He was untouchable until now. Because in that same pile of property transfers, I found something that made my pulse quicken, a forged financial guarantee with both his and Regina's names. I printed the file, but before I could shut my laptop, my screen flickered and a message appeared. "You think you're clever, Miranda. Let's see how clever you are when you lose everything again." My breath caught. Someone was inside my computer. Someone was watching me in real time. I slammed the laptop shut and sat in the dark, trembling. They wanted me scared. They wanted me to stop. But fear had taught me something over the years. It either breaks you or it sharpens you. And I was done breaking. That night, my apartment burned. A faulty outlet, the fire chief said, but I saw the melted padlock and the gas traces. Someone wanted me scared. I wasn't. Standing in the ash, I whispered to myself, "You can't intimidate a woman who's already lost everything once." I stayed with Everett and used his office to keep working. Within days, I traced Victor's secret account, the one funding Regina's fake property sales. He'd hidden it under a trust named Calvary Sunday. The next morning, I received a voice note. Regina herself, her tone sharp and mocking. "Miranda, I heard you're displaced.
Pity.
I could use a maid at Valemont when I move in next week." I listened to it 3 times. Each time, her voice sounded more hollow.
She didn't know yet.
She didn't know I already owned Valemont, and I intended to keep it that way a little longer. Regina thought she owned Valemont. She didn't know I already had the deed in my name through the auction. But I stayed silent, letting her flaunt her imaginary victory on social media. I met Victor Langley face to face at a charity gala. He approached me with his usual confidence. "You must be the stubborn tenant," he said. "And you must be the ghost investor," I replied. His smirk faltered, just slightly. That's when I knew he'd realized the truth. I was no longer a victim. The next morning, Regina tried to enter Valemont Mansion and found the locks changed, guards posted, and a sign on the gate. Private property, owner, Miranda V. Kensington. Everett called me laughing. "Miranda, she's screaming at the guards. She's threatening to sue. She's calling the police." I smiled. Let her. The deed is legal. The purchase is sealed. She has no claim. Justice, I realized, tastes like patience. The mansion was still echoing with Victor's absence when I found the letter. It wasn't hidden, just misplaced, like guilt that refuses to stay buried. In the desk drawer of the master office, beneath an old deed and a list of maintenance invoices, lay a folded envelope addressed in my own name. But it wasn't his handwriting. It was Clara's, Victor's late wife. The ink trembled, as if written by a shaking hand. "If you're reading this, he's taken too much from you. Don't hate him. Pity him. I once tried." Her words stopped me. They carried the smell of old perfume and quiet despair. Clara had seen something coming, something Victor was still hiding. That night, I sat by the marble fireplace, the letter resting on my lap. I whispered to the fire, "You warned me, Clara. But now it's my turn to finish what you started." The next morning, I discovered Clara's signature on one of my old lease documents and realized she'd forged it to protect me. I took the document to a notary I trusted, an older man named Mr. Hensley, who'd handled property transfers for decades. He examined it, his brows furrowing as he looked closer. "This isn't your signature," he said quietly. "This was done by someone with experience." When I told him Clara Langley's name, his face changed. He took a deep breath. "She came to me once. Said she wanted to secure your lease if anything happened to her husband." I felt something shift inside me, the shape of justice, patient and unfinished. Clara had tried to shield me from Victor's greed even in her final days. That evening, I sat in Victor's grand dining room, now mine, and stared at the chandelier above me. "I thought this was about humiliation," I murmured. "But maybe it's about inheritance." Mr. Hensley called that night again. "Miranda, there's more. She didn't only protect your lease. She left you shares in his holding company." I didn't sleep. By dawn, I was standing in front of the county registrar's building with a folder clutched to my chest. Inside were the original share certificates, 7% of Langley Estates holdings, tucked within an envelope bearing Clara's initials. 7% wasn't much, unless the board was fractured. And rumor had it, Victor had debts buried under his empire's polish. When the registrar confirmed their authenticity, I smiled faintly. "Then that makes me a shareholder," I said, "with voting rights." That same afternoon, I requested access to the next board meeting. The secretary hesitated, then glanced at the file in my hand. Her eyes widened. "You'll want to be there," she said softly. "There's going to be a vote." The vote wasn't about profit. It was about removing Victor Langley as CEO. I walked into the same boardroom that once smelled of oak and arrogance. This time, I wasn't invisible. The air felt like metal before a storm. Victor sat at the head of the table, perfectly still, except for the twitch in his jaw. "Ms. Kensington," he said, voice brittle, "you have no place here." I placed my folder on the table. The board members exchanged looks as I opened it, revealing Clara's notarized transfer papers. "I believe the late Mrs. Langley would disagree," I said evenly. The silence that followed was heavy. Then came the murmurs. One man cleared his throat. "The shares are valid. She has standing." Victor stood abruptly, fury sharpening his face. "You don't know what you're doing." I looked at him, not as an enemy, but as a lesson. "Oh, I do," I said gently. "I'm just returning what was taken." When the vote concluded, the board moved to suspend Victor pending investigation. I received a message from his estranged son. My mother told me to find you when this day came. His name was Elias Langley. He met me in a quiet cafe near the marina. No guards, no cameras, just the sound of wind against glass. He looked nothing like his father. I'm not here for him, he said. I'm here because of her, my mother. She wanted me to make sure you knew the truth. Elias slid a worn leather folder across the table. Inside were Clara's personal journals, entries written during the last months of her life. In them, she described Victor's manipulations, his hidden accounts, and how he'd planned to use tenants' names, including mine, to funnel money through shell companies. But in one final entry, she wrote, "If Miranda ever learns the truth, she'll know how to dismantle him, not for vengeance, but for balance." I closed the journal slowly. Balance. That was the word that had carried me through humiliation, through patience, through the storm. The final page contained an account number, one tied to a hidden fund Victor had stolen from the company, and I realized I now held the proof that could end him completely. Elias led me back to the mansion I now owned, though for him, it was still the house his mother died in. We stood in the study, and he said quietly, "She told me once, if anything ever happened, to check beneath the third plank under her desk." We knelt. Dust drifted through a beam of sunlight. Beneath the old wood, wrapped in oilskin, was a leather-bound ledger, numbers, dates, transactions. It looked harmless, but as I flipped through it, I realized what it was. Victor's private money trail. The names of evicted tenants, their penalty fees, false accounts routing to offshore banks. Elias stared at me, pale. "He used their suffering to hide his theft," he whispered. I closed the ledger slowly. "Then we'll use his own greed to bury him, quietly, legally, completely." On the last page of the ledger, a single line. "Final transfer, Langley Holdings to MK Enterprises." My initials. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. MK Enterprises, it didn't exist until he made it. Victor had built a fake company using my name as cover. Every illegal transaction could trace back to me. That was his insurance policy, to make me the scapegoat if anyone ever investigated. I stared at the ledger, my hand trembling, and whispered, so this was never about eviction. It was about erasure. Elias stood, furious. He used my mother's kindness, your reputation, everyone's trust, just to stay untouchable. I turned toward the window, the city glittering like a lie outside. "No one's untouchable forever," I said softly. "Especially those who think they are." That night, I received an email from Victor himself. "You've inherited everything, even the crimes. Let's see how long your moral high ground lasts." I didn't reply. I didn't rage. Instead, then, behind a false panel in the basement wine cellar, we found it, a sealed door. Inside was a small concrete room, cold and damp. On the wall, hundreds of tenant files, photographs, eviction notices, letters, all neatly catalogued. Evidence of decades of manipulation. But in one corner sat a small box labeled Clara. Inside, her wedding ring, her final note, and a recorded message. Her voice, soft and weary, filled the room. "If this reaches you, it means the truth found its way home. Don't destroy him, expose him. Let justice have the final word." Elias covered his face, silent tears falling. I placed the ring in his palm. "Your mother was never silent," I said. She was just waiting for the right voice to finish her story. The next morning, national headlines exploded. Langley Empire under federal investigation. Former tenant turned owner leads probe. The morning after the headlines broke, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. News stations, lawyers, investors, they all wanted a piece of the scandal. But I stayed silent. Because silence, when chosen, is power. Elias came to the mansion that afternoon, holding a newspaper. "They froze his accounts," he said. "Victor's on the run." I nodded. "He'll try to negotiate. That's what men like him do, offer deals when they lose their throne." And right on cue, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Victor's voice. "Miranda, meet me tonight. There's something you don't know about Clara, something even you can't clean up." His tone wasn't defiant anymore. It was desperate. I agreed to meet him, not to reconcile, but to listen. Because sometimes the truth deserves a final stage. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. We met in an empty parking structure, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement. Victor looked smaller, thinner, older. His arrogance had rotted into fear. He held a folder in his hands. Clara never died of illness, he said.
She found out about the accounts.
She was going to turn me in. My breath caught. He looked away. The night she fell down the stairs, she didn't fall. She confronted me. I pushed her. I panicked, and then I made it look like an accident. The sound of my pulse drowned everything else. Why tell me this? I whispered. Because if I go down alone, her name goes with me. Unless you destroy that recording. I stepped closer, calm, deliberate. You murdered the only person who could have saved you from yourself. Before I could speak again, flashing lights flooded the garage, federal agents stepping out, guns drawn. Harper had been recording everything. Victor tried to run. He didn't make it 2 steps. As they read his rights, he looked up at me, not with hatred, but with a hollow kind of surrender. Was she worth it? He asked. I met his eyes. She still is. The next day, every news outlet carried the footage. The mighty Victor Langley, arrested, confessing to fraud and murder. But I didn't celebrate. Instead, I visited Clara's grave, holding the same ring I'd found in the hidden room. I kept my promise, I told her. Justice found its way home, quietly, the way you wanted it. As I turned to leave, Elias stepped out with a manila envelope. You should see this, he said. Inside were documents, Clara's real will. She'd signed it years before her death. It named a single heir, not Victor, not Elias, but a woman named Miranda Kensington. She'd met me once, years ago. I'd helped her with a tenant's petition when no lawyer would. The video went viral. 12 million views. They called it the Mansion of Mercy. Because I turned the estate into a legal aid foundation, a refuge for tenants wronged, silenced, or displaced. Elias joined me as co-director. Harper handled financial reform. Together, we turned the mansion's rooms into offices of restoration. Regina Calvert? She lost everything, reputation, properties, freedom. Last I heard, she was facing charges alongside Victor. And me? I finally learned that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just closes the door quietly and walks into the light. Standing before the cameras, I said only this. Justice isn't revenge. It's remembrance of who we were before they tried to take everything. The crowd was silent for a beat, then erupted in applause. Later that night, as I walked through the mansion's quiet halls, I whispered one last time to the woman whose story had started it all. Rest now, Clara. The house remembers you. They tried to evict me from a house, but they woke a woman who remembered her worth. You know, people always ask me, Miranda, how did you stay so calm when they tried to destroy you? And the truth is I wasn't calm because I was unbothered. I was calm because I was aware. I knew who I was, and I refused to let their cruelty redefine me. There's a kind of silence that isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's the silence that lets truth gather strength while arrogance burns itself out. When Victor tried to evict me, he thought I was powerless. When he mocked me, he thought I'd fade quietly into the background. But power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it studies, it waits, it rebuilds, and then it owns the house they swore you didn't belong in. Revenge is easy. But justice, real justice, that takes wisdom, patience, and restraint. I didn't destroy Victor Langley to prove I was stronger. I let the truth destroy him to prove that integrity always finds its way back to the light. So if you've ever been dismissed, humiliated, or told you don't belong, remember this. Don't waste your energy on hatred.
Build. Grow.
And one day, they'll walk past the gates of the empire you quietly built and realize they were never the landlord. You were, all along. And when that day comes, don't gloat. Just smile. Because you didn't win out of spite. You won with grace. This was my story of losing a roof and gaining the world. If you believe that silence, patience, and truth can rewrite destiny, then don't just watch.
Stay.
Because here, at Sweet Revenge Inn, we don't burn bridges. We build kingdoms. Hit the subscribe button and let's build together. Thanks for watching.